Hi, Year 7. Today we're going to look at the movement of substances, and you may remember quite a lot of this from the chemistry we did earlier this year. First of all, let's see if we can remember about specialized cells from the last lesson. So can you remember the names of the specialized cells? Remember, these cells were adapted to have specific functions and they are in specific places. So we need to remember where they were found and what they do. Which kind of cell is this and what does it do? Can you remember? Yes, it's an egg cell. And this one, two things, the name, three actually, the name, what it does and where you find it. That's what it is, a root hair cell. This one again, what's it called? Where do you find it? What does it do? It's a nerve cell. And this one, what's it called? Where do you find it? What does it do? And this one, what is it called? Look at all the chloroplasts that might help you. That's its name. Where is it found? What does it do? Last one, what's its name? It's obvious where you find it if you look at the name. And what does it do? So today's lesson is about the movement of substances. We need to know which substances move into cells and which substances move out. And we need to know how they move in and how they move out. If you look at the right hand side, there are some key words. As usual with this section on cells, there are a lot of new words to learn. Diffusion we should know, concentration we should know. We're going to recap respiration and photosynthesis in a minute, and osmosis is probably a new word for some of you. Just to remind you of things that you probably learned in primary school, photosynthesis is where carbon dioxide and water are converted into oxygen and glucose, and that happens in the leaves of plants. And respiration is when glucose and oxygen are converted into energy, water and carbon dioxide. And that happens in animals and plants. So that's photosynthesis, respiration, two opposite actions. Right, now we're going to look at the substances that move into a cell, that the cell needs to work. So there are two substances which are in humans. The glucose and the oxygen are needed for respiration, and they're carried around your body in the blood. Now we're going to look at two substances in plants, the water and the carbon dioxide. Water is needed for photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is needed for photosynthesis, and the water cells keep the plant cells firm. We'll hear about that later. Water is taken in through the roots of a plant, carbon dioxide is taken in through the leaves. Don't forget that these processes of respiration are also carried out in plants, not just animals. Right, now we're going to look at the substances which move out of a cell. These are generally waste products. So two of them are carbon dioxide, which leaves animals through the lungs, and salt, which is a waste product which leaves animals in sweat. So here's a quick quiz for you. Are these substances wanted or not? So look at the substances in the box and see if you can work out whether they are wanted by a cell, yes please, or not wanted by a cell, no thanks. So I'll give you a second just to pause the video and try and work out which is which. So here are the answers. Wanted by a cell, glucose, water, oxygen go into a cell. Not wanted, carbon dioxide and salt leave the cell. The next thing to look at is concentration. We just need to know, remembering the shark's blood experiment, that when all the shark's blood particles were close together in the water, like in the beaker on the left, they were in a high concentration, and then in the beaker on the right once the blood particles or red food colouring particles had spread throughout the liquid, then they were in a low concentration because they're far apart. So there's going to be a short demonstration about diffusion using tea bags. Recording test. Hi, Year 7. Today we're going to look at how particles move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. And as you know, that's called diffusion. So we're going to put a tea bag into each beaker. The tea bag particles are obviously very high concentration. And after a while, we're going to see how much has diffused into the beakers. And the beakers are at different temperatures. So we're going to time the time from when I drop the tea bag in to up to 3 minutes, I think it'll be, and then we'll look at the amount of diffusion that's taken place in each one. I just want to talk to you about the variables, remind you about that, and we've got an independent variable, which is the one we're choosing. We're choosing the temperature, so that's our independent variable, and the dependent variable, which is the one we measure, is going to be the amount of diffusion. And the way we can check the amount of diffusion is by looking through the water to the cross at the bottom and see which cross is still visible and see which cross you can't see anymore. We also have to keep some controls, and one of the control is going to be making sure that we time them all the same amount of time. But there's another control that I've deliberately got wrong. So if you can spot which part of the experiment I've done wrongly, that will be great. Remember, controls are things we have to keep the same. Okay, you've mostly spotted it. The mistake is that I've got different amounts of water in each one. So I'm going to remove the thermometer and put a beaker with the right amount of water in it. Okay, so now I've got 3 beakers all with the same amount of water. And I'm going to read the temperatures off. So the coldest one, which has been in ice, is now 8 degrees. And the middle one, which is just room temperature, is 24 degrees. Now science lab's always hot. And the one that was boiled a little while ago is now 78 degrees. Let's see if you can see that.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to drop 3 tea bags in, start the stopwatch. When there's a reasonable amount of diffusion, we'll stop the stopwatch and we'll check which is diffused the most.
Stopwatch.
Make sure it's in the water.
Stopwatch.
Right, they're all properly in the water. So I started the timer. By the way, you can do this experiment at home. Here's the equipment that you need. Obviously you need a thermometer if you have one to measure the temperature in the water, but if you don't have a thermometer, you can just use icy water, warm water, or room temperature water, and water that's just been boiled. So you need the same amount of, you have to repeat the experiment 3 times with the same amount of water. You can do it in a mug or a tumbler. You use the same tea bag each time. If you're using a tumbler, you can use the cross to see how much it's diffused, and then you can write your conclusion down and show people in your family a little scientific experiment. We did a very similar one with the shark's blood, but we had different variables. The independent variable and the dependent variable were different for that one. Okay, I think we're nearly ready to look at these 3 beakers.
How long are you timing them for?
It's now 1 minute 20 seconds. I think you can be patient for 40 seconds, and we'll stop the clock at 2 minutes. Okay, and I'm not going to count down. Actually, maybe I will count down. 1 minute 40 seconds. So Liam is just looking at the crosses. Okay. Boing. If somebody in your family is old enough, they'll remember the countdown tune. Okay, so that's exactly 2 minutes. Let's look at the 3 beakers. You can hardly see the cross in that one. You can still see the cross in that one. And there's been some diffusion. Some particles have moved from the tea bag, high concentration, to the water, low concentration. But at this temperature, which was 8 degrees, there's been almost no diffusion. So we've proved what we wanted to find out. The diffusion happens faster in warm water. And we've also found that without stirring, the tea particles will spread throughout the liquid. That's diffusion. Thanks very much. So I hope you enjoyed that little demonstration of making tea using diffusion. Here's another example of diffusion. If you burn toast, then the smell of burnt toast is all around near the toaster. Those are the red particles. There are none in the hallway and none in the living room. After a minute, the particles start to diffuse into the hallway, because the hallway has an area of lower concentration and around the toaster there is high concentration. After 5 minutes, the particles diffuse all the way to the living room. So they are now spread out throughout 3 rooms and they're all in an area of low concentration. And the reason the particles can move is that, as you know, particles in a gas are always moving at a fast pace. They're also bouncing off the walls and off each other, and that pushes them into different spaces. Now we need to look at diffusion in plants. Plants need water for photosynthesis. The water is in the soil, and the water needs to diffuse into the root hair cells so that the plant can use it. The water molecules move from the soil, which is high concentration, into the root hair cell, which is low concentration of water. Then the water travels from root cell to root cell up through the plant, also by diffusion. The whole process is called osmosis. Now, why do plants wilt? If you look at the plant on the right, you can see it's wilted. And you know that if you see a wilted plant, the first thing you must do is to give it water. And that's because if you look at the vacuole on the right hand side, it's all small and misshapen. So the plant cell is also misshapen. So that's why the plant isn't standing up straight. So if the plant has enough water, such as the cell on the left in the blue circle, the vacuole is nice and full of water. You can see it's making the cell shape correct and firm, and that's why it can hold the plant up straight. Here's a quick quiz. Have a look at the words, match them with the sentences, pause the video, try and do it on your own, and then I'll give you the answers. Okay, here are the answers. Diffusion is the movement of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Osmosis is the process in which water molecules diffuse in the root hair cells and then diffuse through the plant. Photosynthesis is a chemical reaction where carbon dioxide and water are converted into oxygen and glucose. Respiration is also a chemical reaction where food and oxygen are converted into energy, water and carbon dioxide. Lastly, concentration is how many particles of a substance are in a given volume. That's the end of the lesson on movement of substances. You'll be pleased to know that there's no worksheet today, but please go through the PowerPoint and make sure you answer the quizzes. For the last lesson in the chapter on cells, we'll look at unicellular organisms.